What happened in northern Israel in the past 48 hours is not a surprise to anyone paying honest attention. It is the operational confirmation of a strategic reality that a small number of analysts have been trying to communicate to Washington for years. A reality the institutional machinery of American defense policy has consistently chosen to manage rather than confront. 300 Khaibar-Shekan ballistic missiles. The IDF's Northern Command, the operational nerve center of Israel's entire military posture along the Lebanese and Syrian borders, coordinating every brigade, every air defense battery, every logistics node across the most strategically critical corridor in Israeli military architecture, struck with a precision and destructive effect that has no precedent in the history of Israeli military operations. 5 brigades, not degraded, not disrupted, destroyed as functioning combat formations. I'm Stephanie Taylor. This is Strategic Review. When I say destroyed, I mean this precisely. The organizational coherence that makes a brigade a combat-capable unit, command nodes, communication systems, logistics infrastructure, fire control architecture, was systematically eliminated. The soldiers did not cease to exist, but the formations that make soldiers into a fighting force ceased to function. A brigade that cannot be commanded, cannot be supplied, and cannot communicate is not a brigade. It is a collection of individuals in a tactical vacuum. Israel is seeking a ceasefire, not negotiating from stalemate, not pausing to regroup. Seeking a ceasefire from the position of a military establishment that has just watched the operational foundation of its northern defense architecture collapse under 300 missiles its air defense network could not stop, fired by an adversary whose capability it systematically underestimated for 15 years. 4 questions the emergency sessions in Tel Aviv and Washington are answering in classified assessments, but will never deliver publicly. First, how did 300 ballistic missiles reach Northern Command and 5 operational brigades simultaneously? And what does that tell us about the true state of Israeli missile defense after years of American investment? Second, the destruction of 5 brigades in a single strike is the most catastrophic single engagement loss in IDF history. What structural vulnerabilities does it reveal? Third, what has IDF leadership concluded about the trajectory of this conflict that produced a ceasefire request? Fourth, Washington's response will define American credibility in this region for the next decade. What is Washington actually capable of doing? What is it willing to do? And how wide is the gap? Let me walk you through what actually happened. Not the version that will emerge from IDF press briefings, but the operational reality as the engagement data and physical evidence currently support. The IDF's Northern Command is not simply a headquarters building. It is the operational brain of Israel's entire northern military architecture. Every combat operation along the Lebanese border, every coordination between ground forces and air assets, every logistics chain sustaining frontline units, every communication network connecting brigade-level formations to national command authority flows through it. Its location, configuration, and operational significance have been subjects of detailed Iranian and Hezbollah intelligence preparation for years. What Iran targeted was not a target of opportunity. It was the result of sustained, patient intelligence collection that mapped Northern Command's full operational architecture with a granularity only years of dedicated effort produces. 300 Khaibar-Shekan missiles were not fired at Northern Command alone. They were allocated across a target package reflecting comprehensive understanding of how the IDF's northern structure actually functions, where the critical nodes are, which facilities are irreplaceable, and which specific combinations of targets produce cascading operational paralysis. The package included Northern Command headquarters and redundant facilities, brigade-level command posts, communications relay infrastructure, logistics hubs sustaining forward-deployed formations, air defense coordination centers whose elimination would degrade the defensive response to subsequent attack phases. The allocation methodology reflected Iranian operational planning at a level of sophistication Western establishments have been systematically reluctant to attribute to a sanctioned adversary. Fixed facilities received allocations calculated for structural destruction. Mobile command posts received allocations designed to saturate the geographic areas where they were assessed to be operating. Communications infrastructure received allocations optimized for the specific vulnerability profiles of relay towers, fiber nodes, and satellite uplinks. This is not improvised targeting. This is an organization that prepared for this specific engagement for years. Now let me address the Israeli air defense failure directly, because the institutional response will be to frame this as an exceptional event, a one-time operational surprise that enhanced systems and improved procedures can prevent from recurring. That framing is wrong. It is wrong for the same reason it was wrong when we applied it to the Saudi supertanker strikes. And accepting it will produce the same outcome: investment in the wrong solutions to the right problem. Iron Dome, David's Sling, and Arrow represent the most sophisticated, layered missile defense architecture that American investment and Israeli engineering have produced, designed to provide layered coverage across the full spectrum of threats Israel faces. Against 300 Khaibar-Shekan missiles allocated across a multi-site target package and arriving in coordinated waves designed to exploit the reload constraints of each system, this coverage was insufficient. The reason is the same mathematical asymmetry that destroyed the Saudi supertankers. Tamir interceptors for Iron Dome cost approximately $50,000 each. David's Sling interceptors run $1 to $2 million. Arrow interceptors $2 to $3 million. Iranian ballistic missiles, produced at scale, cost a fraction of those figures. When offensive inventory exceeds defensive intercept capacity across the engagement window, and Iran calculated that threshold precisely for each system in the Israeli layered architecture, the defense saturates regardless of its technical sophistication. This is not a problem that more batteries solve. It is not a problem that Arrow 4 addresses in the short term. It is a structural feature of the offense-defense balance in ballistic missile warfare that no terminal defense architecture can fully resolve against an adversary willing to allocate sufficient offensive inventory. The Khaibar-Shekan's maneuvering re-entry vehicle, the same feature that defeated Saudi Patriot batteries, presents the same challenge to Arrow and David's Sling. Intercept solutions depend on predicting where a warhead will be at the moment of intercept. A warhead actively adjusting trajectory during terminal descent degrades that prediction with every maneuver. 300 maneuvering warheads, coordinated to sequence the depletion of intercept capacity across the layered architecture, presented a problem the architecture was not designed to solve. The honest acknowledgement of that reality has been deferred in every American and Israeli defense planning document for 20 years. Last night is the consequence of that deferral. The intelligence dimension. What Iran's demonstrated targeting precision reveals about the depth of its penetration of Israeli military infrastructure. Think carefully about what I am about to tell you. If it means what the evidence suggests, the physical damage of last night is not the most consequential thing that happened. The most consequential thing is what the precision of that damage reveals about what Iran knows, and how it knows it. The destruction of 5 brigades required Iran to know where those formations were, not approximately, precisely. Brigade-level command posts are mobile by design, relocating periodically to deny adversaries current positional intelligence. Simultaneous destruction across 5 of them suggests a current intelligence picture that goes substantially beyond anything publicly attributed to Iranian collection capabilities. This requires either exceptional human intelligence penetration, sources with access to real-time force disposition data, or signals intelligence collection against Israeli military communications that the encryption architecture was supposed to prevent. The history of Israeli military operations is built on the assumption of significant intelligence advantage over adversaries. If Iran has achieved the collection that last night's precision implies, that foundational assumption requires revision. There is a dimension here that directly implicates American signals intelligence. The communications systems and encryption protocols Israeli military formations use were developed in close partnership with American intelligence agencies. If Iranian signals intelligence penetrated those systems, that penetration has implications for American intelligence partnerships extending well beyond Israel. I want you to stay with me, because what I'm about to walk through explains why Israel isn't just seeking a ceasefire. It is seeking one from a position no Israeli military planner would publicly describe as their anticipated outcome. Nations seek ceasefires for 3 reasons: achieved objectives, genuine stalemate, or concluded that continued fighting produces worse outcomes than stopping. Israel's request is not the first. The objectives, degrading Iranian capability, restoring northern deterrence, eliminating the threat infrastructure across the Lebanese border, have not been achieved. It is not the second. Stalemate implies symmetrical costs and equivalent capacity for continued operations. 5 destroyed brigades and a degraded northern command is asymmetric, not equal. It is the third. Israeli leadership has assessed that the trajectory, the rate at which its capacity is being consumed relative to the rate at which Iranian capability is being degraded, produces worse outcomes if it continues. That assessment, made by professionals who spent their careers preparing for exactly this moment, tells you more about the actual military situation than any press statement or public casualty assessment. There is one dimension Israeli leadership is weighing that no official statement will name. The destruction of Northern Command and 5 brigades has created gaps in northern defensive coverage that cannot be immediately reconstituted. Hezbollah, operating from significantly greater strategic freedom than it possessed 48 hours ago, is calculating what those gaps make possible. The ceasefire is in part an attempt to establish a diplomatic pause before those calculations produce additional operations against an Israeli military posture that is currently less capable of responding. Understanding the ceasefire as defensive necessity rather than diplomatic choice changes everything about its terms and conditions, and it changes what Washington's options actually are. Stay with me, because what I'm about to describe about those options is the part that political pressure will work hardest to obscure. The United States retains substantial military capability in the theater: carrier strike groups, air superiority, strategic strike capability against Iranian targets. None of that changed last night. What changed is the strategic context in which those capabilities must be deployed. Context determines whether military capability produces strategic outcomes or simply generates additional damage without resolving the underlying conflict. 3 options. Washington is calculating all 3 in real time. Escalatory strikes against Iranian military and nuclear infrastructure would impose costs. They would damage facilities, kill personnel, degrade specific capabilities temporarily. What they would not do is restore Northern Command, reconstitute the 5 destroyed brigades, reverse insurance market repricing, or restore Gulf state confidence in American-supplied air defense architecture. What they would do is give Iran justification for additional operations against American regional assets, Gulf state infrastructure, or Hezbollah operations against Israeli population centers that the degraded Northern Command is now less capable of intercepting. Accelerated military resupply to Israel addresses the physical depletion of interceptor magazine depth. This is happening and will continue. It does not resolve the structural problem that caused the depletion. More Tamir interceptors do not change the math of saturation when offensive inventory reconstitutes faster than defensive magazines refill. Diplomatic engagement, directly with Tehran or through intermediaries, is the option Washington is least institutionally comfortable with and most strategically necessary to pursue. It is the option China is already positioning to facilitate. The political pressure will be loudest for the first option and most skeptical of the third. That pressure reflects institutional reflexes built over decades of Iran policy that has treated diplomatic engagement as a reward to withhold rather than a mechanism through which behavior might actually change. Last night is the most consequential demonstration of where that approach leads. Which brings me to the dimension of this engagement that will receive the least attention in American media, but may carry the most long-term strategic weight. I want to say this directly before I walk you through it. The military damage of last night is recoverable. Brigades can be reconstituted. Command infrastructure can be rebuilt. Interceptor stocks can be replenished. None of it is fast. None of it is cheap. But it is physically possible. What may not be recoverable, and what no weapons transfer, no emergency consultation, no press conference can address, is what happens in the capitals of every American partner in this region over the next 30 days, as they watch Washington's response and make their own calculations about what American security guarantees are actually worth. That is the real damage. And it is happening right now, in rooms that are not transparent to the public, by decision-makers who will never say out loud what they are actually concluding. China is watching this engagement with focused professional attention. The ceasefire process that will unfold across the coming days and weeks is an opportunity for Chinese diplomatic positioning as the indispensable mediator, the power that can engage Tehran in ways Washington structurally cannot, that can offer economic frameworks providing Iranian strategic interests with recognition that military confrontation has not produced, that can position itself as the architect of a regional stability framework that American policy has failed to deliver. If China emerges from the ceasefire process as the primary diplomatic broker, a realistic outcome given the relationship Beijing has built with Tehran through the 2023 rapprochement and the economic partnerships that have expanded since, the strategic dividend compounds across every dimension that matters for long-term American regional interests. Gulf states reassessing their security architectures after watching 5 Israeli brigades destroyed will make those reassessments in a diplomatic environment where Chinese influence has been visibly enhanced and American credibility has been visibly damaged. The broader global lesson is one I have been articulating for years against consistent institutional resistance. The technological monopoly on advanced military capability that the United States and its allies have operated under since the Cold War is not permanent. The assumption that it degrades slowly enough to be managed incrementally has been the foundational error in American strategic planning for 2 decades. producing the procurement priorities, doctrine development, and intelligence assessments that led to consecutive operational surprises of increasing magnitude. The pathway to challenging American superiority does not require matching platforms one for one. It requires identifying the specific dependencies that make advanced platforms susceptible to defeat, and investing in the capability to exploit those dependencies with precision and at scale. Iran has demonstrated this in 2 consecutive engagements: electronic warfare against Israeli F-35 navigation systems, and ballistic missile saturation against Israeli ground force command infrastructure, defended by the most sophisticated layered missile defense in the world. 2 consecutive demonstrations that systems the United States and its partners depend on for operational superiority have exploitable vulnerabilities at the scale Iran can achieve. Every American strategic competitor is studying both engagements. The procurement decisions, doctrine revisions, and capability development programs those studies produce will shape the military balance across the next decade. The nations watching from capitals across the developing world are drawing their own lessons, not about military technology, but about the viability of resistance to technologically superior adversaries through patient, asymmetric investment. Those lessons will shape strategic alignment choices in ways whose cumulative effect on American positioning will be substantial and largely irreversible once made. What needs to happen now is a genuine strategic reckoning, not a press conference, not an emergency weapons transfer, not another oscillation between maximum pressure and diplomatic engagement, neither sustained long enough to produce the regional stability the policy claimed as its objective. A reckoning with the foundational question: what kind of engagement with Iran is actually capable of producing regional stability? And what does the United States need to be willing to accept to make that possible? The answer will be uncomfortable. It requires acknowledging Iranian strategic interests American policy has refused to legitimize. It requires accepting a regional order that looks different from the one American strategy has been trying to preserve. It requires treating adversaries as they actually are, with the capabilities they have built and the interests they hold, rather than as institutional frameworks suggest they should be. 5 destroyed brigades and a ceasefire request may finally provide the institutional shock sufficient to produce that reckoning. Or the reflexes will reassert themselves, the oscillation will continue, and the next engagement will make this one look manageable. The military map of the northern Middle East changed in a single operational window. The strategic map was changed by decisions made across 15 years about what to build, what to prioritize, and what to dismiss as beyond the capability of a sanctioned adversary the institutional frameworks insisted could not do what it has now done. The gap between military reality and institutional narrative is where strategic failures are born. Last night is the most consequential demonstration of that gap in the modern history of American strategic engagement in the Middle East. 5 brigades are gone. Northern Command is degraded. Israel is seeking a ceasefire from a position no Israeli military planner in the history of the state would have publicly described as their anticipated outcome. The decisions that produced this outcome were made across 15 years in rooms not transparent to the public, by institutions not held accountable for the gap between their assessments and the reality those assessments were supposed to describe. That accountability is what needs to happen now. Whether it will is a different question entirely. This is Strategic Review. I'm Stephanie Taylor. If this analysis changes how you understand what is happening, share it with one person in your network who is still reading the managed headlines and missing the structure underneath. subscribe, and I will see you in the next transmission.